Welcome back again. Welcome back. And we're going to continue our conversation on performance improvement. Do you know whether your team is performing at the level that it should? Do you know if individual members of the team are performing at the level that they should? Are you performing at the level that you should? And that's what we're exploring in these sessions. It's 15-minute sessions. We've done 2 sessions already, and we'll do the rest of this week and next week and the week after that. And we really just, throughout the month of January, discussing how do we improve performance? What do we need to do to improve the team's performance? Now, the identification of performance in the model that I shared with you, the whole idea of effect, right? I want to bring the model back up so it's easy to revisit, right? So let me go back to the model. I want to show you the model again, just to make sure we are clear on what we are speaking about. To improve performance or to take someone on a performance improvement journey or go through the process, we have performance improvements plans, but a lot of times there's no clear path, not just in terms of what is to be done, but the whole idea of the discipline to have the conversations necessary and get the behavior change necessary to improve the performance. So we looked at the effect. What is the actual issue? What's causing the problem? So performance analysis, recognition, admittance. There has to be admittance by the individual that there is something wrong, that they're not performing at the level expected. That's the first thing. Second thing is the cause. And that's what we want to discuss today. What is the cause? What is causing the lack of performance? And now this is where I believe the challenge is. So today we're going to focus on the cause. And really, the underlying cause are two things. One is the idea of mindset or perspective or belief, and the second one is behavior. Now, behavior is driven by belief or perspective. To understand it, we need to go dive in. We need to go deep. So let me get back to the conversation around cause. The thing is with cause is that many times we are not willing to do the work required in terms of identifying the cause. Because someone may not be performing because they don't know what to do, or they don't know how to do it, or they may not want to do it. And that is critical in that identification phase. You need to understand, does the person know what to do? Do they know how to do it? And thirdly, do they want to do it? Because if they don't want to do it, then you have a problem. You have a big problem. If they don't know how and they don't know what, then you can address that, you can fix that. If they don't know, they don't want to, then that's a different situation that requires a different discussion. But to get to that place, we need to have a number of conversations. We need to dig deep. And this is where we need to understand that when we see decisions people make, when we see the way they act and behave and the things they do, to understand how to help them, to understand how to help them improve, help them grow, we have to go below the surface to understand why. If I don't understand why people are doing what they do, then it's difficult for me to help them change what they do. So let's look at an organization, and that's where I believe the crux of the challenges within organizations. We expect that if there's a problem performance, we have the conversation and we set some new expectations, or we put a performance improvement plan in place, and we expect it to be fixed. Invariably, 3 months later, 6 months later, 1 year later, we either ignore the performance improvement plan, we do nothing about it, or we begin to have conversations about exit. And sometimes I've gone into organizations to coach clients when the organization has already decided that they're going to terminate the individual. And that to me is sad. If you want to terminate the individual, then really put the plan in place and move the process forward. The problem is that a lot of times that conversation is not done early enough. So by the time it's addressed, and it could be addressed by a new manager, a new owner, it is then almost too late for the individual. So I want you to consider your lack of performance in any particular area. And then I want you to think about as an HR manager, as a leader, when you look at your team, you want to begin to say, okay, let me look at the individual and understand one, what is the cause of that underperformance? So does the person know what to do? Does the person know, which is knowledge? Does the person know how to do it, which is skill? And does the person want to do it, which is behavior? Once you identify that, here's one caveat to that though. Sometimes people can portray themselves to be strong, arrogant, tough, rather than being stupid. Let me explain what I mean. Sometimes people mask their inabilities by putting on a bravado, and unfortunately I see it more in men than women, where we as men can put on a bravado when we don't actually know what to do, instead of admitting that we don't know what to do. So as a manager, you must be able to take the time, or you must be willing to take the time to have the conversation and to understand the individual. That's where emotional intelligence profiles or personality profiles or behavioral profiles come in. You want to understand the person's natural tendencies, you want to understand their natural propensities, you want to understand what I call natural modalities, right? Because if I understand triggers, if I understand what's below the surface, which is really understanding their skills, their values, understanding their beliefs and their identity, it's going to help me identify the cause of the underperformance. And that's where most organizations struggle, because they're not willing to do the work. Let me explain why. If we think about the average individual who's underperforming, the likelihood is that that underperformance didn't begin yesterday. The likelihood is that that underperformance has not been addressed. The likelihood is that that person has worked and maybe even have been promoted, behaving the same way, acting the same way. And this is where I think New Year's, new planning cycles are great opportunities to draw a line in the sand, where you can make determinations about the performance of the team, of the organization, of the individual, again, which is defect, and begin to now have a discussion around, we know that this is not happening the way we want it to. We know that because we can measure it. So it may be sales, it may be production targets, it may be reporting, it may be financial reporting and analysis. It could be in any area, customer service, where the way customers are treated. It could be a number of areas. But once we identify this, we need to be willing to have that conversation. And then we then begin to lay on top of that behavior. Now, stop for a moment, and I want you to look at the whole idea of why should you take the time to improve behavior, improve performance, or change behavior, improve performance? Because the cost of a new recruit is extremely high. Most of us know, when we look at it, is that it's going to cost you 3 or 4, 5 times the cost of the current employee to recruit a new employee. We sometimes look just at the financial cost, not looking at the training cost, the time to get up to speed. All of that, all of that comes back to the loss to the organization. So it's easier for you to address a performance issue with a current employee than to find a new employee. No, there are individuals who are just performing at such a level that it is probably difficult to recover or to get them to the level that you require. No, here's the thing. Because we either recruited incorrectly, we didn't manage the the probation process correctly, or we haven't had these honest conversations throughout the tenure of the individual, we find ourselves challenged. So take stock. Now is a good time to take stock. So let me encourage you to pause and look at all your teams, look at all your individuals within your teams, and assess them. So I want you to look at the assessment in those terms. What are the three things that, if done well by that individual, so look at each role, look at each department and say, if that department, if that individual does those three things well, the organization, the company, the individual will exceed the expectations. So what you're doing is you're defining what good looks like. So those three things. So take some time, those three things. Every department, every individual. And no, you as a CEO don't need to do that for everyone. You need to get your first, do it for your first reports, do it for the next level below them, and so on. So that's the first thing you want to do. You want to assess where people are at by asking yourself, what are the three things that if they do well, they will excel in their role, or the team will excel. So that's the first thing. The second thing to ask yourself is, if that's not the case, then you need to ask yourself, what are the contributing factors to those three things? And I like to look at it using what I call an ASK model, right? Which is, what are the attitudes required for those three things to be done well? What are the skills required for those three things to be done well? K, what are the knowledge elements required for those three things to be done well? So I just want to repeat that. So the first thing is, what are these three things that this individual, this group needs to do well to ensure their success? So what good looks like. Secondly, what are the ASK, attitudinal qualities required, skills required, and knowledge required to ensure that they do that well? So which means you've now defined what good looks like in terms of three things that they do well, they should do well, and three areas that they need to perfect, they need to be good at. And then you say, what's the gap between where they are to where they need to be? So you are assessing that gap. Now, once you've done that, you are then in a position to have a conversation with the individual. Now, that assessment, you need to do some bench research first. You need to look at some trends, look at some history, to speak to some people. And 360-degree feedbacks are quite good to do that, where you just don't take your perspective. You ask the people around them to give you some feedback to see how they're doing and to get their view on how that individual is doing. So, a quick recap, because we are 15 minutes now. So, you want to understand the cause. And to understand the cause, you need to take some time to understand behavior. You need to understand the belief system. You need to ask yourself three questions, which is two questions. What are the three things that if they do well, that they'll be successful? And the second thing is, what are the attitudinal qualities required to do those three things well? S, the skills required to do those things well. And K, the knowledge required to do those things well. So I really hope this session today has been useful, and I really want to invite you to a session that I'm doing. If you are interested in knowing more about how to improve performance, your performance as well as your team performance, get in touch and we'll talk about how we can help you do that. Hey, Coach Ian B saying it's been a pleasure. Stay safe, be blessed. Talk to you soon.